Hey guys, I'm Charles Neal. You know, I'm a furniture maker, and encompassed in my furniture making, I find myself always having to turn something. You name it, anything from a segmented bed post where I've got tenons and I've got all of this going on, and I've got this taped together so I can show you, and I've got a top, and then I've got my finials, and all this has to go together. And then, you know, here's another bed post that's done in a solid chunk. Rosettes. And more finials. Table legs. You know, knobs, pulls, the list is endless. And so, with that said, one of the things that we have to do is learn how to make things that are multiples of the same. You know, I'm not putting down the bowl turners, because I kind of like turning a bowl myself. But you know something about turning a bowl or a vessel or something, when you got to turn one of something? When you get done, that's how you designed it. This is a little different. We oftentimes have to, you know, come back and be able to make multiples and replicate. You know, we do a table, we need 4 legs. Do a bed, need 4 posts. So you got to do multiples of the same thing. But I will tell you this much, okay? There's a rule. And this might be just my rule, but it works. If it looks the same, it is the same. Okay. But the thing we have to do is we have to start at the beginning, and that's where we're going. We're going to start at the very beginning, and we're going to look at how we do it. In the first place we got to look is the tool that allows it all to happen, and that's our lathe. A lathe consists of the motor that drives it, and this is called the headstock. Now, all kind of different shapes, sizes, and forms. Now, my lathe is a variable speed, and that simply means I can turn my speed up, and I can turn it down. My lathe is also reversible. I can turn in the other direction. Now, you know, oddly enough, for me, that's pretty important. Sometimes I like sanding a lot of times in reverse. The other thing is that if I'm filming, I can turn from this side of the lathe. But the variable speed, that's a nice feature. Okay, a lot of lathes are just fixed speed, and they work fine. You know, you go back and look at the old timers, and they had the old treadle lathes. They had to pump it. And then they had a thing called a spring pole lathe. And that was a big old tree with a rope, and they rigged this thing up, and they had a little helper out there keeping it going. But they turn. Turning's been around forever. Go back and think about the wheel. I realized it was chiseled, but it came out round. Okay. So this is our headstock. Into the headstock goes what's called a Spur Center. And that's what this is. Now you're going to see a language out there. They talk about a number 1 or a number 2 Morse taper. And the way this works, if you look at this, this is tapered, depending upon the size as to which it is. And what it does is it's a pressure fit. This simply sets into the lathe, and that wedge holds it in place. And you're going to see spur centers out here in all kind of different shapes. This is what we call our tailstock, and it will move up and down the lathe. Now into it goes what we call a live center. Now early on most of these were just a fixed point, and the wood literally just, when it was spinning on this one point. Today we have, again, the Lathe Center, and it has a bearing. If you don't have one of these on your lathes, I wholeheartedly suggest you get one. And the reason for that is that that piece of wood turning on just a fixed point, it burns. And it can move. It'll wallow it out. So the Lathe Center holds fast and spins. Again, uses the taper. What you're going to see, and I'm going to loosen mine up here and rotate this around. In the shaft on your tail, you're going to see a notch. Right here. Now what that notch is about, over here, where you kind of can't see, is a little knob. Screws in. And that lines up with that slot. And the reason that does that is so that when you've gotten yourself in position, you can lock this down to keep this from being able to back off. Now the one thing you want to do is you always want to make sure your lathe is in alignment. And the way you do that is you slide your tailstock up to meet your headstock and make sure your points are in line. If they're not, usually there's an adjustment or you can shim them a little bit. But that's important. That's going to keep you on dead true centers. I told you these lock in because of the wedge. To change them and to get another one out, most of your lathes, you'll see this bar and people say, well, what is that for? It's a knockout bar. Now you notice this one's come through because this has a loose center. In that case, I usually take a little block of wood and I just tap it out. Keep your tapers lubricated so that a little bit of wax on them. They're not going to spin on you. And that's how they come out, just knocks them out. If you don't have one, you got an older lathe and you don't know where your knockout bar is, just any bar will fit in there, including a long screwdriver. It works great. Then we come to what's called our tool rest. That's exactly what it implies. You never, ever want to try to turn something without a tool rest. It's the most unsafe thing you can even humanly think of. Now this locks down to the lathe. Then you have the actual rest. And you're going to, you can buy them, make them, anything to support that chisel when you're turning. Because that wood is rotating, and for you to think you can hold that against that, you cannot do it. Now, here's where you want to be with your tool rest. You notice it adjusts up and down this way, as well as it'll rotate. You want this part, you want your tool rest to be about center of the piece you're turning. Right down the center of it. You also want to make sure that when you put your tool rest on, always rotate your stock and make sure nothing's hitting. And for example, if you're turning something that's square and you're turning it into a round, as you move in and you start getting it round, stop, readjust your tool rest. I like to stay back about half, 3/4 of an inch from it. I don't want to be way overextended out here. I don't like that. The other thing you're going to notice is that the length of them can really be, sometimes they can be issues. If you look out there, again, there's a lot of aftermarket, or you can make one. You know, now, to take a bar and attach a good solid piece of wood to it, makes a tool rest. Anything that your tool can rest on. Now, the other thing that you're going to find is a lot of your lathes, the headstock will do one. This one will move in and move out. I can loosen this and I can move the stock in and I can move it out. Okay, I can also take it off, turn it around, and create what's called an outfeed turning, where this is setting out for turning, like, you know, round, big round tabletops and stuff, where I'm using an auxiliary stand for a tool rest. Some of them you'll see out there, this swivels. They're everywhere. And there's so many gadgets, gizmos, and things made for the lathe, and different chisels and whatever. But the basic set of chisels is what we're going to be looking at. Okay, before I get to the chisels, I want to talk to you a little bit about the weight of your lathe, or securing it. And when we get to turning, the faster this thing is turning, the more vibration you're going to get. And so I like to start out kind of at a lower speed. If you don't have a variable speed, kind of my preference, and you'll get to see it as we do some of the speeds, my preference, if I had a fixed lathe, I like it to be about 1200 RPM, somewhere in that range. But now this particular jet this is a Hulse. It's really, really heavy, and that's what you want. You don't want your lathe being able to bounce around and jump around and do all that. Now, a lot of them, they have a stand on them. A lot of them are made to be bench mounted. You can do either. But make sure you have it well secured, that it's not going to be moving around on you. Now, if you have an issue with that and you've got a lathe that has a stand on it, one of the things you can do is make you a platform to go underneath it, and simply take you some play sand, bags of play sand, and weight it down. Anything you can to keep that lathe from being able to move around, because there is vibration. Okay, let's take a look at our chisels. And we're going to look at a basic set. Again, you can go out there and find everything you can think of. And basically what the chisel is it's a piece of high-speed steel that has a particular shape or grind on the end of it. And I'll tell you, if you can take about anything and make a chisel out of it, everything from a screwdriver to a file, you know, you can go to the metal shop and you can get you flat bars, and you can get you round stock, and you can just make all kind of things. You know, the lathe is the only tool that the tool is taking, that the wood is moving and the tool is stationary. Just the way it works. So what you got to be able to do is get your tool in contact with your wood. Now, there's a couple things that are real important we'll look at, and that is, one will be sharpening. But the shape of your tools, and we'll identify some of them and some of the differences. This particular tool right here is called a roughing gouge. And if you look, you'll notice it has the U shape, and it has a bevel cut on it. Now, I'm going to tell you before we get to this, you don't cut on this part of the tool. That's where you get a catch. You're going to be cutting on these edges here. But we'll look at that. This particular tool is called a skew. And the reason for it is the blade is cut on an angle. It has the point here, and it also has a slicing point. It's called your skew chisel. This is called a parting tool. Now, and you'll see what that's for. You can use it to cut lines, grooves. You can also use it in this direction for sizing, and we'll see how that works. This is often referred to as a small roughing gouge or a bowl gouge, and it's simply basically the same thing, except the curve isn't as much as the roughing gouge, and it's smaller. Some call these fingernail gouges or bowl gouges, and what you'll notice with it is that the grind comes further back, and that gives us more of a cutting edge right here, okay? And this is, again, we're not going to be cutting on this point. We're going to be cutting on this edge. This again is the same thing in a larger size. Now when you're beginning turning, these are called scrapers. This is a round scraper, and if you look very carefully, it's got a grind on it as well, but it's a very shallow bevel. And it does exactly what it implies. This is probably one of the easiest and most friendliest tools to use, because it just cuts nicely and it cuts smoother, and you're not going to have the issue with catches and not being just right. The scraper. Here's a flat one. Now these also come in different sizes. And your basic tool set would have them. Here's a smaller one. And again, there's all kind out there. Now, the dominant, before I get asked, the dominant tools that I use, I like the Pinnacle Chirogenic. They're, I don't know, they freeze dry them or something like that, coffee, and it makes the blades, the steel a little harder, and they hold an edge really well. The second one I like is a company called Crown. And if you're a beginning wood turner, I'm going to recommend to you two tools. This is called a Gouge, and I probably said that wrong. Gouge, one of them, and it's a combination of a skew and a gouge, and it acts as a scraper. Makes nice detail work, beads and whatever. It's really, really a nice tool and does a super nice job. Now this is one I'm going to show you, and it's going to look dumb as a rock to you. It did me. It's called a 3-point. And it's basically a round bar that's got 3 sides on it. And our cutting part of this is here, here, and here. It cuts, and you'll see why I like it after when we get to turning. So these are kind of the basic tools. Okay, you could, depending upon what you're going to be doing, if you want to turn pins and do different things, you're going to find, miniature sets and everything else. Again, what you got to do is get the tool to the wood. So different shapes of chisels, different sizes of chisels can play a big factor. But taking a basic set, which is going to be your rough and gouge, your small rounded scraper, skew, parting tool, you're pretty much good to go. You can get started. Now, the other side to the chisel is it's got to be sharp. But sharpening a turning tool is far different than sharpening a planer iron or a bench chisel. Okay, we don't want that fine of an edge. Now that may sound stupid, but basically these tools cut by virtue of a burr, very similar to the way a card scraper or a furniture scraper cuts. And you got to understand that when that wood is turning 1500 RPM, how many times that chisel is engaging that wood. The number of cuts a turning tool makes versus the number of cuts, say, a bench chisel or a hand plane makes, it's a whole lot of difference. And so the edges will have a tendency to wear out quicker. And there's every kind of thing in the world out there for sharpening them. I'm going to show you how I do it. Okay guys, sharpening a chisel. This is your typical, most guys like a grinder. And this has got a 120 grit stone and a 100 grit stone. Now most guys are able, after a little bit, to be able to sharpen their chisels freehand. In other words, they practice a little bit and they're able to come in here and set your bevel and just grind it. Okay. You can also get articulating arms that will allow you to be able to set your odd shaped and whatever to help you control it. Okay, in various situations and angles and whatever, work great. Now, one of the keys is you don't want your tools getting hot. You don't want to get them overly hot. Okay? And for the most part, you're dry grinding. Tools like the Tormek, the Jet, they've got all kinds of different products out there and all kind of different arms and whatever that allow you to set up and do everything. But that gets expensive and it gets complicated. Now, as I always do, I'm going to show you how I do it. I didn't have all them fancy tools, and I had to figure out how to do it. Okay, this is that thumbnail gouge or bowl gouge. What I like is the diamond stones, diamond hones, because they're fast, and I use the coarse. And on these, I can simply, again, this and this is my dominant cut edges, the outsides. And I just keep them toned up, keeping the same factory bevel, same factory grind. You want to feel it here, you want to feel a burr. Okay, now what I've got here is a simple belt sander. And you know, this is one of those, it's a belt sander, you've got the little oscillating drum and all that stuff, normally used for wood. What I've got on here is a 100 grit belt. Now make sure, if you do this, that you got all your shavings and everything out of here, because you're going to create some sparks. You want some safety glasses, shields, all of that stuff. But I'm going to show you how I do it. Here's a block of wood with 3/4 of a circle in it. Not complicated. Portion a bit, block of wood. When I'm doing my roughing gouge, here's what I do. I set it in here, and I make sure I'm lined up on the bevel that I want. A little twisty turn and, well, you got it. Got a nice burr, sharp as a razor. Now, when I'm doing my scrapers, here's another block of wood, simply cut to give me the angle that my scraper is on. Again, get one that matches your factory bevel. And all you got to do is have something flat to set it against, cut your angle until it goes up. I think this is like 25 degrees, or I don't even remember. It doesn't take much to put the burr back and sharpen. I do the exact same thing with my flat scraper. Now on something like my scoogee, what I'm going to do is I come back if I need to, and it's the same thing. It's a roll. Because this is the edge I want to sharpen. I want this edge right here sharp. So all I got to do is stick with the factory grind. But again, coming right back again, with the diamond stones, you can just keep them sharp. Sharp chisel's the whole key. My parting tool. The only thing you want to be careful if you got this ridge in the center, okay, is just be careful to stay out here where you're staying flat to your surface. But again, the diamond hone down one side, down the other, works great. That's basic sharpening, guys. Just keep them sharp. All right, guys, I think it's time to put something on here to turn. Now, when you're trying to find, before you can load your lathe, you need to find the center of whatever it is you're turning. If you're using a square block, which is kind of normal, or even if it's not square, since we're going to be turning it round, it's really not going, if we're going to do a full length round turning, they don't have to be perfectly square. Now you can go out here and you can buy these little things called a center finder, and all it does is makes for a square to mark it. But if you don't have one of them, that's okay, not a big deal. Just take a straight edge, draw a corner to corner, or if you got a little combination square, it makes it even a little bit easier. Now, unless what you've got you know to be perfectly square, what you want to do is go from all of your corners. Because what that will do is that will give you the true center. As long as you're hitting dead on, you're okay. But if not, and fortunately in this case we're pretty good, but you'll see it'll form a little square there, and the center of the square is the true center of your post. Now if you've got something round that you're trying to find the center of, you can do the exact same thing. Just take your square and just tight to it and just draw 5 or 6 times around it. And it will give you enough intersections you can find your true center. See what I'm showing you here finds it a little easier. Once you've found your center, I always like to take an awl, ice pick, whatever, and I like to punch my center a little bit. That makes it, when I'm working to get it mounted on the lathe, it's a whole lot easier for me to get it, to line up my points. The other thing I like to do is I like to take my Spur Center, set it in here, take a mallet, tap it into place, which sets my center. Now I don't have an issue of not knowing I'm not embedded in there nice and tight. Okay, with my centers marked, I'm ready to start to load the lathe. Now before I do, I want to show you something. In this case, this is just an old piece of pine. Actually, it's 2 2x4s glued together. What I did was I ran down my table saw and I took the corners off, just so I don't have to deal with them. Now, here, when we do this, we're going to do 2 things in this. One, we're going to rough this out, and the other thing we're going to do is we're going to get it the same diameter all the way down. Now that's easier said than done, but I'm going to show you how I do it. Now, depending upon what size you want something to be, the best way that I've ever found of doing this is simply take a compass. And using your center, draw it round. Do both ends. This is just simply creating a point of reference. Now, to load it into the center of my spur, and lined it up, come up, give yourself room, lock yourself down. Now I see guys get just stupidly crazy tight. I mean, they just get scared to death and they just tighten these things to no end. You really don't need to do that. Make sure your spur center's in good and snug. If you have a question of whether it's good and tight, rather than cranking on all of your lathe parts, take yourself a block of wood and a mallet, and tap it in. That'll make sure you're well seated. Don't put a whole lot of pressure on your tailstock. Then lock yourself in position. Now you're going to put, I'm going to move this around. Now I'm going to be locating my tool rest about center of the piece, and I'm going to rotate and make sure that it's not hitting. I'm also going to look and try to make sure that I'm the same distance from it. Now the reason I'm going to make sure it's the same distance is that kind of gives me a, something to look at, a reference, if you will, for getting it turned true. And I'm just eyeballing it. And what we're going to do is we're going to start out just roughing this out. All right, guys, here's what I've got is the roughing gouge. It's exactly what it implies. It's made for just hogging off, and I told you, you don't want to be straight in on it. What you want to do is catch this edge right here. A little bit of an angle. You want to hold your tool, sure. You want to hold your tool here. This is your stance. Holding that tool firmly against that tool rest. Down. And you want to come this way. Let's take a look. Now, see where the roughing gouge is taking it off. I like a roughing gouge. They do good, they're quick. But I cheat. Sometimes. Just a good old wide bench chisel. Take a look. It's a little short, but I can manage it. Now I'm going to tell you a little something. I told you it's an old tool 2x4 is glued up. Good old dry pine is about as tough to turn as anything out there, okay? Because it doesn't want to shear nice. When you start getting down close, I'm going to show you the scraper. I don't know how well you can see on camera, but you're getting a better cut. We're coming down the round. When your lathe is turning like this, and you know you're looking now, it looks round, but you know you're not. Simply lay your tool on it. You hear the bounce, you know you're not to round yet. All right, we're coming in close to round. You can see that old pine. Okay, here's your little tip. When you got wood that's just tough to turn and wanting to not shear real nice, take you a rag with a little bit of water and dampen the surface. Now you have to do it fairly often, but it helps immensely. Okay, because this old 2x4 glued up thing's been up in my attic forever and ever, and it's It's dry as it can be. So it's not wanting to turn real nice. But that's okay. We can handle that. Okay. What I did was I came out here and I turned the end of this to my diameter I need. Now, I always, in this stage, I want to stay heavy. I don't want to try, I got to be able to clean this up. So I want to stay heavy. Now, you know what? I don't even know what the name of this thing is. But you can see what it looks like. And what happens is your parting tool this is an old antique one I got. But they're out there. They're easily bought. What you do is you set this up to hang over, and I'll show you this a little better. Simply set this up to the diameter you want. But you want to be close. Then, the way this works is we come in here, and this sits on top, and we ease into it like that, and it's going to cut us to the same diameter here. And we can go down through here and segment this out, then come back and bring it all together, and we'll be the same diameter. Let's see it. Yep. Okay, what I'm going to do is my chisel is against the tool rest, and I'm going to be coming down just like this. Let's take a look. Now, I'm not pushing the chisel in. I'm actually pulling back. I want this end to pull it. In other words, I can take this and see just gouge right on in. So I want the arc here to pull it. See? Now all I got to do is connect my dots. I'm round. All right. What I got here is a little piece of maple, just a little piece of flat wood, and I got 2 pieces of coarse sandpaper on it. I'm round on the same dimension, and I got some scratches, but I just move up through sandpaper grits and I can turn them perfectly round. Another neat way you can do this is take your little block plane. And the angle, what I'm doing is setting here, and as I'm rotating into it, this is about my angle right here. I'm skewing the chisel. I can show you. Let me see. We got to round whatever we want. We continue down it, do the same thing, and we can make this whole piece exactly the same diameter. And again, I'm going to tell you what, that's, you're doing like quarter columns and different things. Turning a length to be exactly the same diameter all the way down is one of the tougher parts of turning. Okay guys, this is called, I showed you this earlier, this is called the fingernail gouge or bowl gouge. And guys, predominantly it's used like on a bowl for coming around the sides of a bowl like this, making sweeping turns when they're wanting to remove a lot of wood. But they do okay on a round turning as we have here. I'll show it. But here's the thing I want you to understand. The cut on this is not straight in. The cut on this is using the outer edge, this cutting edge right here. If when you lay it against your wood, if you lay it this way, you're just beating on the wood. You have to be able to rotate it to get it in contact with your wood. Now, one of the things you have to master and work on and learning to turn is to let the tool go into the wood. It's a matter of letting the tool ease in instead of just jabbing in. Watch. See there, I'm not cutting anything. By rotating the tool to the cutting edge. That's how it cuts. Now the other thing you can do with the fingernail gouge is, like I said, on a bowl. You can use it to rough out anything concave. If you're beginning, and even if you're not, it's hard to beat a scraper. Scrapers are probably about the friendliest and easiest to use. And, you know, I'm not worried about using the big fancies, whatever's. I'm worried about getting the job done and getting it done well. Let's take a look at one of these. That'll allow me to cut. Is that concave or convex? Concave. Now, let's look at something like a bead. Let me get a flat, let's come up here where I got a flat spot already. You can go out here and buy all kind of fancy tools for making a bead. Now, I did that to show you something. The delicate part of making a bead is right here on top. See where that chunk come out? That's the hard part about making a bead. When you take this sharp edge and you roll it around here, those little corners can catch. Never try to fully round a bead. Very, very difficult. So how do you do it? And even if you don't have one of these, there's two places a bead is susceptible to giving you an issue. The first is on either side of the bead to get a clean cut. And as we've seen, the center. Okay, this is my skew. Now, rather than use it this way, I'm going to do something different. Watch. Now what I have now is a sawn line or a cut line that's going to protect the wood on either side. If I want to put a space in that, I can take a small parting tool and do it. But here's a better way. Now the reason that was better is I now have a very nice, clean, crisp line here. No tear out. And I'm going to tell you again, I'm showing you this on this old super dry pine. And I'm going to say it again, it's about as tough to turn as it gets. The only thing I think any worse is that treated stuff. And it's a bear. Now, all I did was cut my lines a little deeper. Now I'm going to come back and I'm going to use my skew. And I'm going to gently, gently roll the edge. You notice I'm not getting to my center. I'm not touching it. Now you're going to be tempted to come really tight into that center. Don't. Now I have the makings of a nice bead. Okay, remember me showing you the 3-point tool? Remember me showing you the 3-point tool? Check it out. Now I want you to notice how fine it cuts. And I'm right on top of that bead. Gently, just very gently applying pressure. Almost sanding. Now when I'm doing this, what I'm looking at is not as much right here as I am up here. Because up here I can see my true profile. All right, one of the best tools on a lathe is a piece of coarse, heavy back sandpaper. Because you want the rigidity of it. And just like a chisel, the biggest thing with a lathe is you got to work your sandpaper to get it in there. And I have a clean, crisp bead. No issue. We saw how to cut a cove. We've seen how to cut a bead. Let's put a couple of them together and see what we get. Now you see this? See that thumping back? See how hard I'm going? That's because this old pine is so dry, it just doesn't want to cut at all. But I can take my little skeugee I showed you. It and the 3 points made by Crown. Watch. What makes this so nice is it's cutting on such a fine point. It's not taking out so much material. So even so, jumping down to a smaller scraper would do the same thing. So now you're going to notice my chisel's bouncing just a little. The reason for it is this old pine is coming off so gritty and so coarse it's getting between the blade and the... See that? It doesn't want to cut very good. So I got to go real easy. Now the reason for the two little cut points is I don't want to chip back. I don't want anything getting damaged going back. Now, I want to take a very, very fine cut. You can still see how coarse that pine is, no matter how fine we go. So you got to go super easy. And you can get you a nice cove. Now, if you can see in here, there's little pits, like little divots. And that has to do with we're going from an end grain into a flat grain. Now that's where you got to have a super sharp chisel and go super easy. And what you're going to notice is I'm going to be almost like sanding here. I'm not even putting any pressure. I'm just about letting this chisel just float along. All right, this is much better. Now I've still got a little rough in here, but I can sand that. Now you're going to notice something. I'm coming in this way, and then I come back this way. That's just more comfortable for me. You know, as long as I can keep my cut point and keep a nice flow, I'm fine. Now, let's assume for a minute that you're not able to get those little teeny divots out. And depending on the wood, the end of those can be pretty, you know, it's end grain. And just like any end grain, it can be a little tough. And it can particularly be tough to finish, because when you're finishing something round, when you sand your post, just like you would an end grain, you want to sand this area super slick. Here's another trick. Yeah, I know. Oh my God. What is he doing? That idiot's going to use filler. Yeah, I am. Yep, sure am. I usually prefer a water base. And the reason I like a water base, because whatever that end grain is going to swell and do, the water base is going to get it. I'll just wipe a little bit in here really hard. And if I've got any little tear out in here, I'll do the same thing. And you're going to get it, trust me. When you get proficient enough that you can turn it without it, you're doing good. But I'm going to give you a clue. Don't let anybody fool you. The best get it. It happens. Ain't that what Forrest Gump said? It happens. I think there's another bumper sticker came out, something. I don't think it was the word, but you get the point. When that dries, I come back, take a little fine sandpaper, clean it up, sand all my filler off, because the only thing I want it to do is seal those end grains. Okay, I've shown you some of the basics. Now we're going to come back and put a little bit of it into practice and create a leg. Now the leg we're going to do is going to be smaller, and so that's going to present us another issue. And the issue it's going to present us is going to be called spindle whip. And that's something you're going to have to deal with. And just in case I forgot to mention it, make sure you got a shield on, protect your eyes, hearing, the whole deal. Now I don't have an apron on because I can't do it and turn and do all those things, but a good, nice fitting apron or a long or shirt or whatever, something to cover yourself is a good idea, because you can bet yourself on one thing: when this is done, my pockets is going to be full of sawdust, and so is my shoes. So make your safety precautions. All right, guys, what I got loaded right now is I've got a 29 1/4 inch long piece of cherry that's 1 3/4 inches square. like we were making a small, we were making a small table or nightstand type table, whatever. And so I'm going to, if this were, I would be mortising into the top. So I want to keep the top square. Now, one of the tough parts of doing that is trying to bring the round into a nice clean edge, corner, if you will. And what's hard about that is that trying to turn it clean without chipping the edge. Show you how I do it. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lay out the top of my leg here. Just get my length. In this case, I'm just setting it at 5 inches. Take a square, draw it around. Now, remember where we used that parting tool and we used the skew to make a cut line? Well, we're kind of going to do the same thing, except we're going to use a saw. And all we're going to do is saw in on our corner. I'm going to go in on this one about 3/8 of an inch deep, here to here. My worst case could be that if I did something stupid and I chipped that edge, that little corner piece, I could probably get by gluing it on, but not if it lands in the mess we're going to have. So here's what I do. Take me some masking tape. Duct tape works too. And I come around this and I tape this just as tight as I can. Now this is going to do two things for you. The first thing it's going to do is it's going to protect those corners, number one. Number two, it's going to give you a good visual reference when it's spinning. And you're going to be able to see exactly where you're at. Now, you can go to the auto body supply store and you can get masking tape. It's the plastic. In this case, it's blue. And it's about 1/8 of an inch thick, or wide rather. And they, in the auto body industry, they use it for, doing stripes and all kind of stuff like that. But because it's nice and blue, it can give you a reference as well. All right, make sure it's down on there good. My first object of the game is I want to get this round. So that's exactly what I'm going to start doing. Now in this case, I got the square corners I'm going to deal with. I'm going to start with the rough and gouge, but when I get to this point, I'm not going to worry about this up here. I'm not going to get real close to that shoulder. Now I'm going to give you a tip. If you don't want to deal with them corners and you still want this square, take your bandsaw, set it on 45 degrees, okay, and bandsaw your corners off, obviously stopping before you get to your transition point. Now I'm going to start right here and I'm going to ease in. I'm just going to be easing in. On my tool rest, what I'm going to be doing, and you're going to see it out here, is I'm going to be going boom, just easing in, taking little bits. And because this scraper is straight across the front, as I'm on this tool rest and coming in, that shoulder makes me a little stop. But just go real easy. And that blue tape gives me a nice, good reference for what I'm looking at. A bench chisel. Okay guys, what I got out now is my bowl gouge, or that fingernail gouge. Because I like the shear on it. I like the shear cut. I like the length. I like the shear it gives me. Now I want you to notice that I'm a little closer and I've got my line. I'm set. And all I'm doing is laying in here and following that tool rest right on down. Now I want you to listen to something. When I get in this area and I get here, I want you to listen to the chisel. Now what's the difference in the sound? And you'll notice we're round here, but I want you to see this. We're not round here. We're bumpy, chunky. What's happening? As the chisel's coming down, even at this thickness, with this thing rotating, we're getting a vibration. We're getting what's called spindle whip. And that's where the inertia of the thing turning the piece of wood wants flex. The further we go, the further down we go, the worse it's going to get. You'll notice we don't have it here and we don't have it so much back here. And that's because these are our most stable points. As we get to the center is where it's starting to show up. Now, if you don't have what's called a steady rest, you probably need to look into one. You probably need to look about getting one. And I'm going to show you one. First thing we got to do is, before we use it, we got to make sure we got a point that's nice and round. If you're getting a lot of spindle whip, you need one point that's going to be round. Gently with your sandpaper. Create yourself one nice, smooth, round area in the center. We got it. All right, before I get too far into this, I'm gonna take my block plane, because I want you to see this. Don't set it too deep. I'm not too bad. I'm not picking up a whole lot. Just a light skew on it. You don't want it this way. You just want a light skew. Skew means an angle. All right. Now that picked up some of that chatter or some of that irregularity. Now, what a steady rest is, guys, is a steady rest is exactly what it implies. It's to hold it still. Keep it rotating smoothly. Now here's one. This is a commercial made one, relatively inexpensive. Now it uses bearings right here, and they do okay. You can buy bigger commercial ones, as you can see. Now these use a nice nylon wheel on it. Okay, I like these a little better. I'm going to show you one I made this lathe. Again, some roller skate wheels or inline skate wheels. They work really, really well. Now all I did, I've got a C shape cut out. These little guides allow this to slide up and down so that it can't kick anywhere. Now you can now these are made out of metal. You can usually get any metal shop or whatever to make you some. And you can also make them out of wood. Just make it out of a really good hardwood and something that's going to hold up. And all you got to do is, as you're in there, is again just be able to adjust. I can also take them off and move them to the outside. I can do pretty much whatever I want. And as far as mounting it to the lathe, you can get really fancy and put a bolt through it and do all that. All I do is set it up here, got a block of wood under it and a clamp. Clamp it down, I got my steady rest. Don't get crazy with it. Just because this is C-shaped, I've seen them where you've just got a vertical piece of wood and another one coming out, another one coming this way. I actually made this out of a double ply of MDF. Works well. Oh yeah, the bolts in it are 3/8. About a quarter will work. 5/16. You can use a half. Don't complicate it, guys. You just need something that is going to stabilize your wood when it's turning. And again, those roller skates and inline skate wheels. And if you watch around in the neighborhood, you'll see them kids out there. They run off and leave them skateboards and stuff and don't pay no attention. Or check the dumpsters. Good source. All right, with the steady rest secured to the lathe, all I got to do is adjust my wheels up to my round point. And what this is going to do is stop that chatter and stop that spindle whip. Now they're a little cumbersome to work around, but it's a whole lot better than having that shaft do all that whipping around. You're hearing a little bit of chatter still. And the noise you're hearing is because I'm not perfectly round there. That chatter was still giving it to me. So I can come in here beside it and get me a little better spot and get to where I need to be. All right, so since I'm down on the foot side of this thing, we're going to make a nice pretty little leg, and we're going to start down here. And it's just something I'm going to make up as I go. And we're going to turn a little onion foot. We're going to turn a nice little taper on it. Up here we're going to do a little cove, put a little bead on it, nice transition, and let you see it happen. beginning of a foot. Okay, what I've done is all I did was move my steady rest, and I got my tool rest on the other side of it. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm just creating a slight taper, and I'm going to come up just about into here. Okay? Now, again, now I will tell you this. If I were turning this leg, if I were turning 4, I would be going step by step by step. In other words, I'd round them all. Then I would put my steady rest on, and I would do my foot. I would do each one. But we're going to look at that just in a minute. Because one of the things I always do, okay, I always turn a pattern. Turn it out of some of that old pine, some scrap, anything you want. Turn you a pattern so that you wind up knowing exactly where you want to go and what you want. Okay, so now I'm going to move on. Now what I'm using right now, you notice down here the tools I used. You know, I use my skew chisel, rounding my little ball here, my scraper, and now I'm using my thumbnail or my fingernail, whatever you want to call it, bowl gouge. And all I'm doing is just coming up through here working on my taper. All right, for the moment, that's going to do. That'll be close enough. I got a little bump right here I will get. Now, I situated myself so that I could get my tool rest in here. Now, this is a pretty big tool rest. And like I said, you know, sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. And, you know, you can make or buy shorter ones and all kind of different sizes. But I'm going to be working right in this area, so I'm okay. Now, what I'm going to do right here is I'm going to leave a straight collar down about 1/4 inch. Then I'm going to do a cove. Then I'm going to do a little bead that transitions from the turning, from the cove and the bead into the leg. Let's watch. Now what this is just my scraper. And all I'm doing is making sure that I'm nice and round and smooth right here at my transition. Now I'm going to lay out for my cove. Now what I did is I switched over to a small spindle gouge, because all I'm going to do is make this cove. So I'm going to rough it out with this. Now I'm going to go to my curved scraper. Alright, got my cove. Now I'm going to create the bead here. Actually, I need to do a little bit more on that cove. Now we're going to do the bead. Pretty much finished with this steady rest because I've got the basics of my turning. Might have a little something up here, but I'm not going to be getting that whip up here. And I've got pretty much the profile of my leg. Now, what could you do if you inadvertently, not intentionally, if you chip this corner? Well, you can repair it, of course. You know, if you, like I said earlier, you know, if you can get some glue and you know, it's just a little chip, you can just glue it back in there. But let's say you chip it or you want a little different look. Now, a lot of guys, if they want to curve a corner, they try coming in this way. And what that does, because the wood is shearing against it, it wants to chip it around it. We're far better off to slice it. I'm going to use my skew. Watch. By skewing in on it, making the cutting it instead of shearing it, you will get a much cleaner, nicer Look. Then you can come back a little bit from the front and clean it. Now here's another thing. We can also use our skew and that cut for a little decoration. And you see the little cut line. You see the little taper up. And I can sand this on up and around, and we'll look at that in a minute. And then we have a little turn leg. To wrap up my taper, a block plane. Again, just skewing along here. True it right up. Now, get you a straight piece of whatever. This happens to be, this is some 36 course. Make sure I'm nice and straight. Doesn't, just something. And a straight board. Put it on here. This is going to ensure your taper is perfectly straight. No lumps, no bumps, no issues. And I'm checking it. Everything's coming in pretty good. Now I can start sanding everything on down. Work everything on down until you're happy and you got everything good and smooth. Now here's your tip. If you have a reversing lathe, by turning the lathe going the other direction, takes the sanding dust and throws it away from you. Sand it up, clean it up. Now here's another thing. Because you're sanding against the grain, always, when you're done, give this a quick going over with some 220. Lightly run over it with a little 320. That way, the scratches go, the sanding scratches that are going against the grain are not there. The other thing you can do is set it up on your sander, on your lathe while it's there, and sand it this way. Now here's another thing that works really nice. Now guys, this works really nice. Check it out. Random orbit. Like glass in a heartbeat. Works quick. I take a little bit more, a few scratches, but you get the point. Okay. Now, I told you, this is my pattern. This is the easy part. Now we got to make some identical to it. That's a little different. But let's just assume for a moment that there's some part of this we don't like. And we want to change something. Does that mean we have to go completely turn another leg? No, not really. We can change it, but again, we're doing the pattern. All right, guys, I'm going to show y'all Charles Neal's secret pattern making fixer-upper. Make that how you want. Secret weapon. As you can see, this is a pattern. Turned out of an old piece of a treated post. And here's one we're going to be showing you where we were doing a fluted post. Actually, it's the one I showed you earlier, where we was working out how we wanted all of our taper and our flow and our sizing for our fluting and all to be right. And as you can see, it didn't come out exactly like we wanted it on the first time. It probably didn't come out exactly like we wanted it on the second time. But we got her done. Now I'm going to show you how I did it. Now we're going to redo this cove right here. We're just going to assume that that's not how we want that. So we're going to make it how we want it. My secret weapon, body filler. Yeah, man. Now, I know. Listen, most of y'all know, in case you don't, I'm going to tell you. For many years before I lost my mind and become a professional woodworker, I used to do auto body work. Fixing wrecks and doing all kind of custom painting and trick painting and all that stuff. So I've used a little bit of this stuff. It ain't, you notice I got a piece of paper down here. This ain't the cleanest thing in the world to get this stuff slopped on here. One of the things you want to do to make sure it holds really good is kind of wipe it in, just get a light coat on it, then just start working it. It ain't gonna be pretty. It turns great. Plane's great, car's great, does all them things. You know, I'm gonna tell you a little something. You know, it doesn't color very well as far as wood goes. But I'm gonna tell you what, a lot of restorers, you know, use this stuff to rebuild legs and things like that, then they artificially color it. Now it's pretty hot in here today, so this will set pretty quick. But you kind of got to watch it. The more hardener you put in it, the quicker it sets. Like I said, it ain't going to be pretty. But it'll work. And all I'm kind of waiting on it to do now is just stiffen up a little bit where it'll stay where I put it. Yeah, I know, y'all think I'm dumb than a brick. But you're going to change your mind in a minute. Now the reason I want to get my pattern right is because we're going to take this pattern and be utilizing it in all of our areas and spaces and everything to get the others right. I might need to put another coat on here because it's already, you see how long it took that to set, but again, it's pretty hot in here today. All right, we're going to let this mess harden up a little bit, then we'll get to it. You know, I'm going to tell you something about this stuff. When you come back, you know, you give this thing 2 or 3 hours, and this stuff's as hard, it's as hard as this cherry. Every bit. It gets really hard. Okay, guys, I'm just going to show you. It's set up. Make sure you don't have anything hitting your steady rest. Make sure your lathe's going the right direction. Turns great. Now we'll get another angle and let you see it take shape. All right, I'm pretty much back to where I started. Now, if I wanted all of this filled in, then obviously what I could do would be to put another little coat on there. But I've now restored the post with something that I can turn to make a pattern out of. Now I'm getting a little bit of whip even up here, and that's because this is so thin. So what I'm going to do, this is another thing about a variable speed lathe. I'm running about 1200. I'm going to slow her down a little bit. The other thing I don't have to worry about that body filler is I don't have to worry about chip out. Let's say I want to make this just a little shorter. Now you're going to notice where I'm making this bead, I'm creating a collar just below it. Same thing at the top, kind of like a capital to finish it off. Now I'm not getting the whip, and I'm at 648 RPM here. But I'm also turning the body filler, which hadn't been on there but just a little bit, so it's still kind of soft. It's still pretty soft. It's hard enough to work, but soft. Then I took a little parting tool, and all I did was put another little collar just below where the bead's going to be. Then I simply made the bead. Now what I'm telling you and what I'm showing you here is that when you're turning something, turn it to suit yourself. And using the body filler or whatever you need to do, get yourself a pattern that suits yourself, that you like. Once you've got that, you'll have it forever. Keep it. All right. We've moved our collar up. We've got our, I'm looking at it, I like that better. I like the little shorter collar in here. I've got a leg that I think the proportions are nice on. I think the flow of the leg is good. So now we're ready to make some more of them. And like I told you, that therein lies sometimes the tougher part. But I think we got some ways that'll help you a whole lot.